This evil lawyer killed his own clients. In the 1960s, in the small town of Borington, Indiana, there was a lawyer named Gol Sudman who had never lost a case. But what no one knew was the dark secret behind his success. His clients always walked free, but they would mysteriously vanish days after the trial. One day, a desperate widow named Anita Bath came to him, pleading for help after her husband was wrongfully accused of murder. Gol took the case. She sold everything she owned to pay him, trusting he would save her family. But after Gol won the case, her husband disappeared. It turns out Gol wasn't just defending his clients. He was using their cases as sacrifices to a twisted deal he made with someone or something darker. Every time he won, an innocent soul vanished. Sure, they didn't go to prison, but they vanished. When the woman complained to Gol and asked where her husband is, he said, "You asked me to save your husband from prison by any means possible, and I have done that, but your husband is gone." 3 years later, the woman finally came out and reported her husband as missing, but the lawyer was nowhere to be found. Investigators came to the conclusion that the clients were either dead or sent out of the country, being used as slaves by the people Gol made deals with, the same people who would make sure he wins every case. This is the dark history of the Minions. In 1967, New York City, there was a man named Phil Mycrack. He lived in an old, decaying mansion at the end of Blackwell Street. People whispered that no one had seen Phil in years, but strange noises came from his basement late at night, like gears grinding in the dark. One summer night, a young kid named Kevin decided to find out for himself. He snuck into the house, creeping down into the basement. What he saw would haunt him forever. Dozens of small, yellow men, wearing overalls and goggles, were laboring frantically, assembling something enormous. In the center of the room was Phil, barking orders. They were constructing what looked like a massive doomsday device. Kevin bolted, barely escaping unseen, and told his parents everything. But when they called the police, no one believed him. They said Kevin was making up stories to get attention. For months, everything seemed quiet. Then, out of nowhere, one of Phil's creatures escaped, limping to a neighbor's house and begging for help. Only then did authorities raid Phil's home. Inside, they found exactly what Kevin had described, an underground bunker filled with machines and a half-finished weapon. Phil was arrested, but not before he made a chilling statement. "You stopped me this time, but they'll find another. They always do."
This entire class of students vanished, and you will be shocked at what happened to them. In 1963, at St. Vincent's High School, the morning started like any other, with history lesson in room 303. But halfway through the lesson, the teacher, Mr. Walker, stepped out for a moment. When he returned, every single student was gone. The police were called, and an intense investigation began. Desks were left untouched, backpacks on the floor, as if the students had simply evaporated. Some said they ran away, others believed a kidnapper was involved. But there was no sign of a struggle, and the classroom windows remained locked from the inside. A few days later, the janitor, an old man named Frank, came forward. He said he had found something disturbing in the basement, a set of old, dusty textbooks, identical to the ones the missing students used, only dated 1913. Inside, there were names written on the covers, the names of the missing kids, and next to each name, the word returned. The school records revealed that a class of 30 students had vanished 50 years earlier, in 1913. They were never found. Were they from the past and traveled to the future, and now somehow traveled back to the past? What do you think happened?
This man was the Donald Trump of the 19th century. In 1852, New York City was crazy about Douglas Framp, a loud businessman known for his wild hair. Framp got rich selling Amazing Tonic, a drink he said could fix anything from baldness to arguments. Framp loved big ideas. He wanted to build a super tall building called Framp Tower that would touch the sky. When the city said no, he decided to run for mayor, saying he'd make New York great again. His election events were wild. Framp would show up in a fancy gold carriage, throwing pennies to people and yelling, "I'm rich and you will be too." He said he'd build a wall around Manhattan to keep out bad people from New Jersey. But Framp's luck ran out when people found out his tonic was just watered-down whiskey and bear fat. Angry crowds chased him, so he ran away to Canada. To this day, old-timers in New York claim that on quiet nights, you can still hear the ghost of Douglas Framp haunting Wall Street, shouting fake news at people passing by. This American woman killed 300 people in one day. In the quiet town of Goobersville, Indiana, in 1949, a woman named Aileen G. Anus was the beloved lunch lady at Sunnydale High. For 20 years, Aileen served meals with a smile. But one morning she had other plans. She laced the school's water supply with a colorless, odorless poison. By noon, students and staff began collapsing. Chaos erupted. The hospital was overwhelmed. Parents rushed to the school in panic. As sirens wailed, Aileen calmly walked home humming a cheerful tune. The death toll rose to 352 lives lost. An entire generation of Sunnydale gone. Aileen was found in her kitchen, baking cookies and listening to the radio. Her only words upon arrest, "I was saving them from the pain of living." Investigators later discovered 20 years' worth of journals detailing her plans. The Sunnydale massacre remains one of the deadliest single-day killings. In 1954, police decided to investigate her home more. They decided to break the walls, and what they found there was truly horrifying. These were the most evil kids ever. In the summer of 1963, in the small town of Wiggletown, Alabama, there were 3 kids by the names of Buzz, Doodles, and Beanie. They seemed like typical children, but they secretly enjoyed hurting others. They would trick delivery men, babysitters, even their own families into bizarre games that would always end in a mysterious accident. Strange accidents started happening around town. A house fire, an unexplained car crash, each incident tied to someone who had scolded or wronged the kids. One day, the 3 kids lured 18-year-old Alice into a basement, claiming they had a surprise for her. As the door closed behind her, they revealed their plan. Alice was never leaving. They had spent weeks soundproofing the basement, preparing it as their personal dungeon. They were happy, but their joy would not last. There was an old woman who lived at the edge of town named Skinny Barb, known for her creepy house and strange ways. They thought of her as the perfect target. They broke into her house, only to find it empty except for an old mirror in the living room. They laughed at their reflection, until the mirror's surface rippled. One by one they disappeared into it, screaming as their faces twisted into the glass. Finally the woman appeared and said, "You might lay traps, but I live in them." The boys were never seen again. Why is this evil man never talked about? In 1938, in the heart of the Great Depression, a man known as Stan Still haunted the back streets of New York City. Dressed in a fine black suit, with slicked back hair and a cold, unnerving smile, Mr. Still had a reputation that sent shivers down the spines of even the toughest criminals. It wasn't just his cruel nature, it was the mystery behind him. He was known for visiting families down on their luck, offering them help in exchange for a simple promise. Desperate, people took his deals without asking questions, but those promises came with a dark cost. One by one, the families would vanish without a trace. No blood, no struggle, just an empty home with a single black coin left on the table. What made it worse was that no one could describe his eyes. Everyone who met him could remember his smile, his voice, even the details of his polished shoes, but his eyes, blank. In 1949, a survivor came forward, an old woman who claimed she made a deal with him when she was just a girl. He promised to save her family if she gave up her voice for one night. The next morning, she awoke to silence, and her family was gone, never to be seen again. And though she never spoke again, she left behind one haunting message before disappearing herself: "He'll come for you when you least expect it." Why are they hiding this evil part of history? In the 1950s, in the deep hills of Arizona, there was a young woman named Rosemary. She lived with her sick mother named Abigail Marsh in a crumbling old house. Rosemary was super tall and had a condition that made her look like a mummy. The townspeople feared her. One day her mother's health took a turn for the worse, and she passed out. Rosemary quickly called the local doctor, Dr. Rick O'Shea, crying and making weird noises as she couldn't talk. The doctor happened to know them and managed to get to the house quickly, but by the time he was there, Rosemary's mother was already gone. Dr. O'Shea tried everything to revive her, but it was too late. He broke the news to Rosemary, but she refused to believe him. In her eyes, the doctor had failed her. Worse, she believed he was the reason for her passing. As the doctor tried to leave, she cornered him. She didn't use words, just raw, terrifying strength. The townspeople would later find his car abandoned outside, but the doctor was never seen again. Days later, the people of the area noticed something strange. Rosemary was seen wandering the streets wearing the doctor's white coat. She walked with a creepy smile into the forest, never to be seen again.